I'm going to assume that means we're ready. I call to order the meeting of the Verona Common Council for Tuesday, May 28th, 2024 at 7:07 p.m. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Next, we'll have the roll.
Alderperson Braithwaite.
Present.
Alderperson Harrison.
Here.
Alderperson Helmke.
Present.
Alderperson Hoaxed.
Present.
Alderperson Kimmett. Alderperson Lytle.
Here.
Alderperson Posey.
Here.
Alderperson Tucker Long.
Here.
Excellent. Everyone's here. With that, we'll move on to item 4, which is public comments. If any members of the public wish to speak, now would be the time to do so.
I feel like this is going to be redundant from the last go-around, but Megan Clark, owner of Toot and Kate's, thank you for having me. Thanks for getting it back on the docket after the last meeting. I do apologize for not attending or sending a representative. In all honesty, I've been doing most of the legwork on this, so it probably wouldn't have mattered much. But I'm a mom and my son had a baseball game, so that's that. Happy to be here tonight. I understand that what I presented last time, based on the parameters I was given, worked, but it's very hard to visualize if you're not familiar with our area, our storefront. Doesn't seem like the measurements would add up. They absolutely do, with the 2-foot setback or without. The ADA, the sidewalk is over 4 feet. You know, I submitted pictures last meeting that maybe you guys can take a look at in terms of what we had previously, summer of 2020, 21, and 22, where we did have people out for overflow seating on the terrace, and it was a really great thing for downtown. People seemed to enjoy it. A complaint came in last year, and that's kind of where it all fell apart. So I would love the Sidewalk Cafe ordinance to pass, not just for us, which I think it's getting a little honed in on just Toot and Kate's, and I want it for the whole city. I think the majority of residents in Verona want a walkable, just vital downtown area that breeds connection and community and culture, and that's what Sidewalk Cafes do. In terms of our area, with the fence, I'm working with a company. I obviously don't want to get too far ahead of myself doing that because it's not a cheap undertaking. But I feel very confident about the sturdiness of it, the sections that actually it's in the picture. It would be sections that kind of like hook together that each have feet that would prevent tipping one way or another. It's the real deal. And I understand why that's needed. I would like to say with our specific storefront, there's parking stalls, street parking, that you're already opening your door into Main Street traffic, one building up in front of Mr. Schmidt's law office. And so that is already like bowing traffic out closer to the center. And so next to our building, you're not going to find cars right by the curb. It just doesn't happen. And they're already slowing down because of the stoplight. And as I said in the last meeting, it's like I've tried to do a rooftop, I've tried to do a back parking lot. This is our feasible option. It stays in the alcohol sight lines. It's good for the community to see people out. So I just feel super strongly about it. I'm here to answer any questions you guys have. The pictures I submitted show a variety of surrounding communities with the sidewalk cafes, some with barriers, some right up on the curb. I think about my neighbors, Avantes, where it's like, would they need a barrier if they're putting tables out in front of their storefront? I mean, that's close to the building. And so I would just ask from the council's perspective to hopefully be open to this and realize, yes, we can't do everything on a case-by-case basis, but the nature of the permit is to examine everyone's individual location and decide to approve or not approve, and then we can amend if needed. So I guess that's all I have. I can answer any questions. I didn't really understand that last meeting was me to present and not say anything, so if you guys have questions for me now, I'm ready. Oh.
And you shouldn't have spoke then either, but, sorry. But, no, yeah, but Alder Tucker Long is correct that once it comes back up, if someone has questions, we can call you up if you can
Okay,
stick
perfect.
around.
Okay, that's
Thank
all I
you.
got. Thank you.
We are still in public comment. Do any other members of the public wish to speak? Not seeing anyone approaching the microphone, so we'll move on to item 5, which is the approval of minutes from the May 13th, 2024 Common Council meeting. Questions, comments, or motions to approve?
Move approval.
Motion by Alder Posey. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Alder Humke. Last chance for corrections? Seeing none. All those in favor of approving the minutes from the May 13th, 2024 Common Council meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And the minutes are approved. Under mayor's business, we have I have two items, I guess I should say. First one is a Gun Violence Awareness Day proclamation, which I'm going to read to you. This proclamation declares that the first Friday in June to be National Gun Violence Awareness Day in the city of Verona, Wisconsin, to honor and remember all victims and survivors of gun violence, and to declare that we as a country must do more to end this public health crisis. Whereas every day 120 Americans are killed by gun violence and more than 200 are shot and wounded, with an average of nearly 18,000 gun homicides every year, and whereas Americans are 26 times more likely to die by gun homicide than people in other high-income countries, and whereas in Wisconsin has 678 gun deaths every year, with a rate of 11.5 deaths per 100,000 people, a crisis that costs the state $8.4 billion each year, of which $144.3 million is paid by the taxpayer. Wisconsin has the 37th highest rate of gun death in the United States, and whereas gun homicides and assaults are concentrated in cities, with more than half of all firearm-related gun deaths in the nation occurring in 120 cities, and whereas cities across the nation, including Verona, are working to end the senseless violence with evidence-based solutions, and whereas protecting public safety in the communities they serve is the mayor's highest responsibility, and whereas support for the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding citizens goes hand in hand with keeping guns away from people with dangerous histories, and whereas mayors and law enforcement officers, in partnership with local violence intervention activists and resources, know their communities best, are the most familiar with local criminal activity and how to address it, and are the best positioned to understand how to keep citizens safe, and whereas gun violence prevention is more important than ever as we see an increase in firearms homicides and non-fatal shootings across the country, increased calls to domestic violence hotlines, and an increase in city gun violence. Whereas in January 2013, Hadiah Pendleton was tragically shot and killed at age 15, and on June 7th, 2024, to recognize the 27th birthday of Hadiah Pendleton, born June 2nd, 1997, people across the United States will recognize National Gun Violence Awareness and wear orange in tribute to Hadiah Pendleton and other victims of gun violence and the loved ones of those victims. And whereas the idea was inspired by a group of Hadiah's friends who asked their classmates to commemorate her life by wearing orange, they chose this color because hunters wear orange to announce themselves to other hunters when out in the woods, and orange is a color that symbolizes the value of human life. And whereas anyone can join this campaign by pledging to wear orange on June 7th, the first Friday in June in 2024, to help awareness about gun violence, and whereas by wearing orange on June 7th, 2024, Americans will raise awareness about gun violence and honor the lives of gun violence victims and survivors, and whereas we renew our commitment to reduce gun violence and pledge to do all we can to keep firearms out of the hands of people who should not have access to them, and encourage responsible gun ownership to help keep our families and communities safe. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Mayor Luke Diaz of the City of Verona, declare the first Friday in June, June 7th, 2024, to be National Gun Violence Awareness Day. I encourage all citizens to support their local community's efforts to prevent the tragic effects of gun violence and to honor and value human lives. And my next item, which is B, is an appointment of Angela Guthrie to the Parks, Recreation, and Forestry Commission. I guess I would entertain a motion to confirm this appointment. Motion by Alder Kimmett. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alder Tucker Long, I think. All those in favor of confirming the appointment of Angela Guthrie to the Parks, Recreation, and Forestry Commission, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And that motion passes. With that, we'll move on to item 7, which is announcements. Any announcements from the council? Seeing no hands, we'll move on to item 8, the administrative report. Mr. Olick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Public service is always an interesting occupation, and you never know what's going to happen day to day. And on my way to work last week, as I got closer and closer to the city of Verona and saw overturned trees and damage. And by the time I got to City Hall, entire neighborhoods were wrecked. Quite shocking, quite shocking. Overnight, our DPW reacted immediately to clear the main roads of the city, took a few hours sleep, and then came back to work the next morning to start cleaning up neighborhoods, subdivisions, et cetera. And I'll tell you what, it speaks volumes about Hometown USA, because they gave me plenty of stories where neighbors were helping neighbors clear their driveways, their front stoops, brush. One of the DPW workers who is tasked, he's actually a forester, his garage got hit by a tree, and while he's gone, he finds out that his neighbors are trying to remove the tree from his garage, which is extremely dangerous, by the way, and he had to tell them no. So it speaks to the character of the people of this community, how much when a push comes to shove, we care about each other, we look out for each other. It's going to be a multi-week cleanup. It is. There's just that much volume of debris, and the DPW, of course, today had a 3-day weekend where people went out in their backyards and cleaned out more debris, understandably so, and that'll get cleaned up as well. But really, you should be proud of not only your crews, but the people you represent here in Verona, about how well they reacted. My phone wasn't ringing off the hook with complaints, help me now. It was, everybody was out helping each other out. And that really speaks to Hometown USA. You should be very proud. A couple of other things. We won an award, if you didn't hear, for Fireman's Park. Both MSA and the city of Verona for the design of the park. We won an award recently for that. So the Parks Department keeps making us proud. The Art House has banners that they're going to hang on the exterior of the building. The condition is that basically the hanging system, as we all know, and had talked about during the lease approval process, cannot affect the masonry, right? So what they'll do is they'll take their hanging system, which has to be safe, right? We think about that last storm last week. They can't, be a safety hazard. So they have a system that's in place in other areas of south central Wisconsin and other places, which does not affect the masonry. And they're going to run that by our facilities manager, Mr. Simon, and make sure that that's approved by him. So be aware of that. Lastly, summer's here. We just had Memorial Day weekend. This is the start of summer, and guess what? If it's Verona, it's Hometown Days. So if you look behind City Center here, you'll see they're getting ready for all the wonderful things that go along with Hometown Days. So that's on the docket as well. So everybody is very busy, not only cleaning up, but helping out with what they need to do as far as crews are concerned, helping set up for Hometown Days. So busy, 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 but in all the best ways. And that's what I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Aulick. Any questions on the administrator's report? Seeing no hands, we'll move on to the engineer's report. Ms. Fisher.
Thanks. I really have no updates this week. We can take questions.
Alder Kimmett.
Do we have any update on when the Century Park will be done?
I don't. I can check with Public Works and see. Do you?
Mr. Aulick.
Alder Kimmett, I will field that one. We are putting pressure on the developer at the moment, and it's supposed to be done by Friday of this week as far as sodding grass is concerned. So they are having an issue, and they know about it, and we are absolutely on it, and so is the developer. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do we currently have any plans for the unveiling of said park?
let's jump through one hoop and get to the next. I'm going to punt that one on a little bit, but I'll tell you what.
No, the answer is no, we don't.
But when we do, absolutely, I mean, that is a big deal, right? That is a gem of the city of Verona for many years to come. We absolutely will have a version of a dedication. We'll let you know, and hopefully before you leave, but, you know, it's what it is. Thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Fisher? Seeing no hands, we will move on to item 10, which is committee reports. First up, we have 10A Finance Committee. Alder Humke.
Yes, thank you. So I'd like to make a motion for payment of the bills in the amount of $825,522.29.
Motion by Alder Humke. Is there a second?
Second?
Second by Alder Posey. Alder Humke.
Yeah, so one of the items is $217,878 payment to AECom for engineering services. Another large payment in the amount of $269,588 to Parisi Construction for Eastview Road reconstruction. That's all.
Thank you for that explanation. Questions or comments on the motion to pay the bills? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of paying the bills in the amount specified signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And that motion passes. Anything further from Finance?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. We'll move on to item 10, which is Public Safety, or 10B, I should say, Public Safety and Welfare Committee. Alder Host.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion to approve a special event permit application and temporary Class B fermented malt beverage license from Robert Pryboth, Verona Little League for Hometown Days fundraiser on Saturday, July 1st, 2024, contingent upon final background check and issuance of operator licenses for the event.
Motion by Alder Host. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alder Kimmett, I think. Alder Host.
Thank you. Verona Little League is hosting a tournament on June 1st, 2024, and is requesting a temporary license to sell beer as a fundraiser. Beer will be sold and consumed on the upper balcony of the complex. There is one entrance and exit to the upper balcony, and someone will be stationed there to check IDs and issue wristbands. The building inspector has limited the total number of people on the balcony to 66 persons.
Thank you for that explanation. Questions or comments on this motion? Seeing no further discussion. All those in favor of approving the special event permit application and temporary Class B fermented malt beverage license from Robert Pryboth, Verona Little League for Hometown Days fundraiser on Saturday, June 1st, 2024, with the contingency specified in the packet, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And that motion passes. Alder Host.
Thank you. Next is the discussion and possible action regarding ordinance number 24-1053, creating Title VII, Chapter 14 of the Code of Ordinances regarding sidewalk cafe permits.
Mr. Kleinmeyer, or did you have a...
We'll turn it over to Mr. Klein.
Mr. Kleinmeyer.
So we did have a discussion of the ordinance that is in your packet at the committee level. My understanding is the process of how we've got here is you did discuss in a sidewalk cafe permit ordinance at your last common council meeting, had a fair number of comments that were shared with city staff. Then city staff met internally, I think received some additional comments from alders via email, and essentially prepared the draft that is now in your packets. Some of the changes that are in the document, or at least issues that I think some council members raised and that city staff tried to address, were sidewalk width. In other words, there is language in your in the draft in your packet that requires 4 feet between the store itself and where the cafe would be located. That is something that's required by federal law for Americans with Disabilities Act. So that's, just to provide that background, that's not something, a lot of things that you have flexibility on in this document, that's not one of them. That's one that we have to keep. There's language in there regarding fencing. My understanding is that there's been some discussion about 3-sided fencing versus essentially 4-sided fencing. Staff is certainly prepared to discuss, why the existing draft has 3-sided, obviously knowing that ultimately is a common council decision. I believe you had a discussion at your prior meeting and certainly at the committee level today on zoning districts as it relates to Section 7-14-3A of the current draft. We also had discussions and made some modifications regarding operational hours, and one of the things that was added to the ordinance that's in your packet is to make clear that only food and beverage could be served as the result of a sidewalk cafe permit. It wouldn't be other merchandise. But, you know, I'm certainly willing to discuss any other changes that you might want identified from the draft that you had at your previous meeting to this one, but also I think staff is here to answer whatever questions that you may have and to provide whatever guidance that we can to the extent that you want to modify the draft that's in your packet, but you certainly have the discretion to do so.
Thank you for that explanation. And just to clarify, for the body, public safety ran out of time, so there was no recommendation from the committee. So we're basically starting from blank. And with that, I will open it up for comments. Who wants to be first? Alder Hunke.
I'll go first. Okay. I do have some questions about the ordinance that I went through, just before I state any other things. Okay, so in the 7-14-2, the definition section, the sidewalk cafe where it says 3 or more people, is that, can you just, is that there has to be, is it 3 groupings of 3 people, or like that there's just like more seating for more than 3 people? Just so that.
So this, I mean, I'll try to answer this, but then other staff should jump in if they can. So my understanding is that this is language that's taken from an ordinance from a different community that has a sidewalk cafe permit. I certainly think if you want to, you would have the ability to delete more than 3, so that the ordinance, that definition would read, that provides seating for people in the form of. I mean, it may be that other community, when they drafted it, were of the belief of, look, if you're only going to stick 1 table out there, so only 2 people can sit there, or we're not going to require you to get a permit. My thought would be that if you're having anybody that's utilizing the sidewalk outside their business, they should have to come to you to get approval, because at the end of the day, that is a sidewalk, and it is intended for public use. And while I think, you know, clearly other communities have adopted these permits and this concept, I think it definitely serves a public purpose, so that you do have the ability to approve this, notwithstanding the fact that you're going to be limiting in some way, shape, or form the use of a public sidewalk. But I do think that a permit should be required no matter how many people would be there. So that may be one way to address this, is just to remove the phrase more than 3, just so to the extent anybody wants to put something out there, they're
Okay,
going to have
thank
to do
you.
it.
And then I have another question. I'm confused about the permitting, the difference in the timing of when you would need to get a permit with the July 1st. Like, how would this work in the first year when we want, if this passes, we want businesses to be able to do it now? How does that July 1st timing and like why do we have dates, I guess was one of my questions, and how do those correlate to each other so we can make sure that businesses would be able to take advantage of it as soon as possible?
Sure. So we've had, in the new draft that's in your packet, there's a new section 7-14-4 sub F. So the reason why to have it for renewals, and the reason why it's drafted from the July 1st to June 30th date, is because that's the same renewal time period for alcohol licenses. And I think there's an expectation on staff's part that to the extent that folks want to have these sidewalk cafe permits and they want to sell beverages, they're probably going to be asking to serve alcoholic beverages, which means they're going to have to amend their alcohol licensing permit to include these premises. And so it makes sense, if you're going to be filing your alcohol license permit, to file your sidewalk cafe permit at the same time, so they could be processed. One, so that if you're a business that's abiding by the law, you're going to get approval of both at the same time. If we're having issues, in all likelihood, they're going to come up as it relates to both permits. Now, that's for the renewal period. We've added language here that says, for avoidance of doubt, the May 1 date identified in the introductory paragraph is intended to cover an application for a renewal of a sidewalk cafe permit. The previous sentence says, notwithstanding the previous subsections, an applicant may file an application for a new sidewalk cafe permit at any time throughout the year. So if you're, like right now, obviously we're past the May 1st deadline. Anybody that wants to come in to get a sidewalk cafe permit under the current code that would last until November 15th would be able to come in at any point in time between now and November 15th. The other dates regarding the I think it was where we want things filed by May 1st, again, that is to coincide with alcohol licensing.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so now I'll give my thoughts. I think we should strike the more than 3 people. I guess I don't personally care if there's more than 3 people. I don't really like the idea of having that located within 50 feet of property occupied by residential use. I think if we say that, like, we're not going to have this in a residential zoning district, so I think that if we amend it to that, that's fine. I have looked at sidewalk cafe permit ordinances for other cities in Wisconsin, and there was a piece that like wasn't added, which I thought might be interesting to add, not interesting, but like helpful. And it talks about just like the material must be, weatherproofed, attractive, and kept in good repair. I think that would be helpful just for looks purposes. And I actually went out to, this is because Totten Kates is the example of what we're talking about. I agree that this is a great ordinance that we have, like, for going forward as more developments are happening, like referenced in the meeting about potential other areas of the city. Like, it's just a good thing to have in place. But in this specific instance, I'm going to use this as an example. I went out to the business, and I would agree that the cars are not coming like more than they're 5 feet away from the curb. I think currently it reads 2 feet from the back of the curb. I took my measuring tools out and pulled down some of the seating and tables. And I think having 2 feet from the curb, like the front of the curb, it'd be more than fine, given the distance of cars. I do think that there should be an enclosure. I'm fine with a 3-sided fence. I do think it should be of, wind resistance, self-supported, secure, basically not going to blow over, for safety of our, the people who are, enjoying the establishment. And what else is there? I just think that, like, from a safety perspective, having a distance is important, but I do think this would bring vibrancy to our community. I do think it is safe. I was skeptical. I'm going to make that comment because I was the person that was skeptical and didn't think it would work. And going out there and seeing it, and one of my sort of skeptical thoughts was, there's big trucks that come down that street, right? There's trucks that have big, mirrors that stick out. A truck with a big mirror happened to be there when I was there, and it wasn't even close to the establishment. I was worried that people would be sitting there, and there'd be cars or trucks right close to where they're seating, because, it's a safety concern, right? I do want to make sure that we are being safe with the people that come. They entrust us that if we were going to say that this is okay, that this is a safe place for them to be. And I had no concerns, and I was standing there with a significant amount of traffic going by at that point in time. So, I'm hopeful for this, and I think that I'm hopeful that we can come together and have resolution amongst all of us about what we want this to look like.
All right, who's next? I'll talk next, I guess. Oh, Alder Tucker Long, and then myself.
I'm going to take a while. Do you want to go first?
Sure, I guess. We'll have a polite contest. I'm like, no, you go first. All right, I guess I'll try to keep it brief. I do want to say I really appreciate Megan for coming out and testifying. I know it's busy every evening, and I do want to emphasize that I think I, like everyone else up here, is a big supporter of local businesses. I've supported Totten Kates both as a customer and back when I was an alder, and I think if we're a little bit slow on this, it's because people want to make sure we're safe and that we work out, all the potential angles, because so many of our ordinances are not written for 95% of the people. They're written for 5% of the people who might abuse it, and we just have to be careful because we're responsible for the whole city, although I'm pretty confident we'll get something good done tonight. I guess as far as the ordinance itself, I do want to say I think the version as presented by Alder Kimmett during public safety is closer to my preferences. I think it's a little bit more permissive than the staff recommendation, but I think that it's better to be more permissive on this, because I do think it adds vibrancy to our downtown, and the questions about safety are well founded, I think, but we have real world evidence of 3 seasons where there were no issues, and for a lot of our ordinances, we kind of have to hope for the best, or guess, or copy what other communities have done. And for this one, we know what happens, which is it's fine and people like it. So I think that I feel more comfortable, just having it there. I do think if there's parking or it's a fast street, there should be a 2-foot setback. In regard to Main Street, it's a slower street, so I would feel more confident, just having the fence go right up to the curb, because as stated, it was fine without a fence, and so this is really a safety upgrade. And as far as, if anyone parks there, it's illegal to park there, so we shouldn't be accommodating people illegally parking, and that includes if you put your flashers on, because that's not a magical get out of a jail free. So, so anyways, I do think I like this with, you know, the suggestion of Alder Helmke to potentially remove the 3 or more people, and potentially just to clarify that, you know, the neighborhood, it can't be allowed in neighborhood residential zoning. Technically, if it was something like a mixed use where there is residential, I think there's a different expectation where you could have a restaurant downstairs. I don't think a sidewalk cafe would be a big deal, but I do just want to say I really hope we get something done, and I like the version presented by Alder Kimmett at Public Safety Best, at least as a starting point. Alder Takalon.
Thank you. So I have a lot of comments, and they were based on the original copy that we received. So some things might be a little bit different. I'm trying to quickly compare it to the updated version in the packet. I will say, yeah, I am definitely in favor of removing the for more than 3 people and the definition of a sidewalk cafe. I feel that's an unnecessary restriction. And then going to section 714.3 sub A, no permit shall be issued for a sidewalk cafe located within 50 feet of property occupied by a residential use in a residential zoning district. I feel strongly that we should just strike this completely, and the reason I say that is because if the business has already been approved to be there, why shouldn't the business be allowed to have a sidewalk cafe, especially since the business is probably already allowed to have a patio? I don't see how a sidewalk cafe is different. The sidewalk cafe is already required to be adjacent to the building or adjacent to the business. And so if it's adjacent to the business and the business is allowed to be there, I feel this is just a weird thing to restrict. It doesn't make sense to me. Also, you know, we don't know how zoning is going to be changed in the future, or, you know, how even our current zoning is going to be changed over the next couple of years, even with the comprehensive plan going into effect. So I feel like if the property is allowed to be there, the property should be able to have a sidewalk cafe, regardless of how close it is to residential zoning or what district it's currently in. Next up is, okay, so 714.3 sub B and 714-3 sub D seem to be covering the same thing, so I feel like they should just be combined into one list to make it more easy to follow, especially since they both address the fact that it needs to be immediately adjacent to the placeholder's place of business, and it seems weird to have to say that in 2 separate bullet points there. Next up is section 7-14-3 sub D sub I. The additional sidewalk proposed to be used is in front of another commercial use that does not qualify to obtain a sidewalk cafe permit. I don't feel like, since in order to have a sidewalk cafe in front of an adjacent business already requires you to get permission from that business, I don't see why we need to require that that business cannot qualify, cannot be allowed to obtain a sidewalk cafe permit in order for them to give you permission to use it. Like, if they don't want to use their space, why wouldn't we want to allow them to use it? I understand that they couldn't have sidewalk cafe permits simultaneously, but just to flat out say that if another commercial business could qualify for it, that you can't use it, just, I mean, as long as they're not using it, we should let other people use it. So I would want sub I there removed. Moving on to section 7, sub 14-4, sub A and B. This seems overly onerous to the person making the application. I guess we're not regulating the number of planters and tables and chairs, so why do we need an accurate drawing of them in the space? If that somehow related to the approval process, I could see needing that, but unless we're restricting the number of these things or the type of these things, it seems strange to need accurate drawings of all of these kinds of pieces of it. Next up, 7-14-4D through F. This is all supposed to be things that are supposed to be included with your application, and D, E, and F are not things that should be included with your application. They're other requirements for the applicant and for if the business is selling alcohol, and so it seems weird to put it into a list that's supposed to be what must be included in your application. Next up, 714-5 sub A. This seems like should be a blanket rule for all city permits, and so I'm curious if this applies to all city permits or if this would be something that's new. Okay, and if it applies to all city permits, do we have it someplace else, or is it just in every single section of the ordinance? And that
I
can be
believe
addressed
it's in
later.
different sections.
Yeah.
In other words,
It
I
is
don't
listed
believe there's
everywhere?
one home section that, but this is required, there's case law. Essentially what happened was, at one point in time in the past, a municipality required this for somebody to get an alcohol license, and the court said that's fine, but then you have to treat all of your other permits and licenses within the municipality the same as your alcohol license.
Sure. The reason I called it out is because I feel like we should have like a permit and license heading, and that could go there instead of needing to repeat it in every section, but that's more of a housekeeping thing. And then 714-5 sub B. So giving opportunity for, opportunity shall be given by the common council to any person to be heard for or against the granting of the permit. I'm all in favor always of us listening to people, but this seems overly broad. And I'm wondering if this is intended to mean during the public comment section of the council meeting where we're addressing the approval of the permit, or this just, I just felt like this was maybe a bit too vague about what this means, about what we're granting to people. I don't want someone to misconstrue the fact that like we're going to hold a special meeting for them or something. And then, in addition, again, isn't this standard that we allow people to talk during public comments? So I'm just curious why this is even being mentioned. Is this something we normally mention in our application process? And then at the end of sub B, it says the city clerk shall provide the applicant the reasons for the denial in writing. Is this something we do for our other permits as well? Yeah, okay. As long as it's part of our standard procedure.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I guess I'd defer to you, Holly. This is more language that you'll see for like alcohol licensing, is you have to, I'm not sure if we provide like a denial of a permit, if you always provide something in writing.
Okay, because I just want to make sure we're not adding additional work for staff that isn't for everything else. Because the thing is, we have to remember that a sidewalk cafe license isn't the same as an alcohol license. I mean, sidewalk cafes don't have to serve alcohol. So I am concerned with coupling it too tightly with an alcohol license. But like I said, don't want to make extra work for the city staff that isn't necessary for them to do.
I would just say it's always best practice to provide something in writing when you deny something, so that if you ultimately are challenged on your denial, that you have a record of it.
And I guess if I could add one clarifying point, I think it's also just you owe it to the public. If you deny it, you kind of owe people an explanation.
Sure. Okay, so section 7-14-6. We have the permitting dates for various parts of the application and renewals in various places throughout this, and I think we should have all the dates in one place. And additionally, I'm curious why we have the permit year starting July 1st and going through June 30th. And then continuing on down, we have like Sidewalk cafes can be operated from March 15th to November 15th. That's section 714-7. So kind of 14-6 and 14-7 are both about times of year. I think a winter cafe with some heaters on a nice weekend might be really cute. So why are we saying we can't have it in winter? And if this is about snow removal, perhaps then we could just use language like we do for parking, where during snow emergencies, things have to be cleared. But we have been having more and more times.
We don't do snow emergencies. It's just alternate side parking regardless, is my understanding. That Madison does snow emergencies, but I don't think, can someone help me out here? No, I don't, no, we don't do snow.
Sorry, having lived at a residence where we do the alternate side parking, we're starting, I think it's October 15th, maybe even, because I feel like it
it's
might be
November.
early.
I think it's November 15th, yeah.
And then you just have to alternate side from then all the way until the springtime end date. But yeah, we don't call an emergency.
Okay.
A blanket.
Just a blanket. So I guess I would, I mean, since the sidewalks themselves are going to be clear anyways with these, I'm curious if the sidewalk cafes really need to be removed for that much of the year, especially considering things are staying warmer later and getting warmer earlier. I'd rather not restrict it. And then as far as hours of operation being listed in this ordinance, I would rather just say that, that maybe they're allowed during the same time periods as outdoor patios are allowed, and we can keep all of those times in one place, so it's easier to update them.
No, I know other communities, when they have outdoor patios, they do that as part of a conditional use permit process, so it's not in the actual code, which is why you would want to leave this language in the code if that's because you're not going to be able to refer to a CUP. So I don't know how the city of Verona does it, but my understanding is that was the goal. I think these times have been updated, and I think the idea was to be consistent with our current alcohol licensing rules as they relate to when you can start sales, and then also later for outdoor patios. But again, that's why it's in here, because I don't think that we actually have code language that deals with the outdoor patios.
Yeah, just add, I know for certain conditional use permits, we have specified the hours of operation, because, yeah.
Okay. I guess maybe I would rather see it then being when it's open or when, again, I don't like tying this to when alcohol sales are allowed, because you don't have to be selling alcohol in order to get this. And, I mean, we have cafes that open at, early in the morning, and, a morning cafe is a great place to have an outdoor sidewalk cafe. So, I don't want it to be tied to alcohol sales as far as hours of operation and things like that. So, section 7-14-6, sub 3, THER should be THE. Okay, next up, section 7-14-7. So operation of a sidewalk cafe outside of those days and hours is prohibited. I would rather see, instead of it being prohibited, I would rather see it require a special event permit, so that if there are things that we want to do that may benefit from having a sidewalk cafe outside of those hours, that we would have the flexibility for those to be applied for. Next section, section 7-14-8, the wording pending a hearing before the Common Council. Do we have hearings for any other kinds of permitting in front of the Common Council? This seemed kind of, I guess I'm not familiar with hearings, and maybe we just haven't had one since I'm only been here a year, but.
We do for alcohol licensing.
Okay.
Well, I would also say the issue is here, you are the entity that is granting the permit, and so I think you need to give the flexibility to administration to be able to essentially revoke it if they see a reason to do it immediately, but that permit holder then, I think, would have it would be reasonable for a permit holder to say, wait a second, I want to come back to the body that granted it to make an argument as to why I should be able to maintain it. So, I mean, I think I think at a staff level, we'd be totally comfortable having the authority to revoke a permit and not having it come to you. We viewed this more as, you know, if you're the entity that's granting it, then you ultimately should be the entity that revokes it if and when it comes to that.
Okay. Again, like I understand we do this for alcohol, but if we don't do this for other aspects of restaurants and cafes, I'm curious if we really need it to be this structured. I mean, I'm 100% in favor of the fact that if somebody is violating the provisions, that the city clerk or chief of police can just revoke the permit. And since people can apply for a large portion of the year, potentially the whole year, like we were discussing earlier, if we expand it, it seems like they would just be able to reapply. So again, just trying not to add a whole lot of unnecessary complications for this. Under liability and insurance, section 7-14-9, sub A, permittee must maintain insurance in the amount of $1 million per occurrence. I just wanted to double check that this is that the standard amount we ask for everything else? Okay. In section 7-14-10, we kind of talked about fences in sub A already. I would be in favor of just needing a fence on sides that face a street or driveway. I don't know if we have a specific kind of wording we can use for place where cars drive that would cover all of those kinds of situations. But you know, I feel just requiring the fence on the areas that face traffic would be ideal. And then I am also in favor of having the 2-foot setback for the curb be if there's parking allowed there. And I agree with the removal of the word parallel for parking, just because if cars are pointed directly at the sidewalk, I think that's even more likely they'll go over the top of the sidewalk than with parallel parking. So I'd rather it just, if there's parking there, or if the street has faster traffic than 35 miles per hour, then require a 2-foot setback. Otherwise, allow it to be at the curb for the section of fence. And then as far as the fence must be approved by the Public Safety and Welfare Committee and the Common Council, I feel like this is something that staff should be able to handle as far as approving the fences. We have staff approve building materials for other building projects, and so I feel like staff has much more expertise in that, and so I feel like it would be better if staff approved that rather than having it come to the council to approve. Additionally, I feel like having to go through a committee and then the Common Council to get your fence approved is kind of onerous. And then as far as what the fence shall be made of, we have standard wording we use for building materials that we talk about high-quality building materials, and I just like to make sure we're being consistent in that wording. And I feel like where it says "or like material," I feel is very vague, and if we're going to be vague, then just say it has to be approved by staff, so. And then the last sentence there, for avoidance of doubt, the fence shall be sturdy and heavy enough such that it is not blown into the public street or public sidewalk. I would rather that be defined into like, can hold a certain amount of weight or something more definitive, because being blown into the street varies wildly based on how much wind we have and other conditions. So I just feel like that's not very clear. And then subsection C, where permittees shall provide for the removal of garbage from the sidewalk cafe and not allow garbage to blow into the streets or sidewalks. I feel like littering is already not allowed, and unless we're requiring them to provide a trash bin, this section seems like a weird restriction. And I'd rather not have restrictions that we're not really going to enforce or or are already enforced elsewhere, so. And then in subsection E, on the second line, it says, the chief of police or their designees may temporarily order the termination of a sidewalk cafe for the any of following, and that should be for any of the following reasons. And then the last sentence of E, where it says that the city may remove the furniture if necessary. I'd rather remove the wording if necessary, since we're already saying may. So may seems to me to imply that it's at our discretion, and then if necessary, it sounds like we would have to provide some sort of proof that it was necessary, and I'd rather just leave it as we can if we need to. And then this might be a question for Chief Dresser. In subsection F, no sidewalk cafe shall be located within 10 feet of a fire hydrant, curb cut, or crosswalk. I understand how we have no parking within 10 feet on either side of a fire hydrant in order to allow the fire truck to pull up to it. But the fire truck is probably not parking on the sidewalk generally, but maybe they are. Maybe we want to make sure they can if they need to, but I'm just curious the reasoning for this.
I can't think of anything in ordinance or statute that governs that, other than, I guess, you can't park within 4 feet, of an intersection or a driveway. So, I think it was just a reasonable estimate to keep the area clear in the event of an emergency.
Okay. I guess I would like to decrease it then to maybe 4 feet, just because we do have a significant number of fire hydrants on the sidewalk, and it's never a bad thing to have more fire hydrants available.
I should clarify, I'm sorry. So if we're talking specifically of a fire hydrant, there is ordinance that restricts parking near a fire hydrant. And I would have to look up the ordinance to see exactly how many feet that is, if it's 4 feet or 10 feet. But that is on the book, so I apologize for that.
Okay, but in this case, we're talking about a sidewalk cafe. Do you know if the parking within a fire hydrant, is that specifically so that the fire truck has room to pull up?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, okay. And so would you be comfortable with having a sidewalk cafe closer to it because it's removable and because it's not blocking the parking?
Yeah, that might be a better question for the fire chief, but as the police chief,
Yeah.
I'm okay with it, but I think some of the
Sure.
concern would be accessing the fire hydrant.
Okay.
And, some of the hose isn't flexible, some of it's sturdy, so having enough room to work around the fire hydrant, I imagine that would be the concern.
Okay. I would like to check with the fire chief then, because I do know that in neighborhoods, like just driving around a couple of neighborhoods this weekend, there's a lot of things that are much closer than 10 feet to fire hydrants, including bushes and electrical boxes and free little libraries and things like that. And so if it's necessary, I am 100% in favor of having it in here, but if that's not actually necessary, I'd rather have that decrease so we have more space for the sidewalk cafes. And then curb cuts and crosswalks, again, I think 10 feet is in excess, especially since the sidewalk cafe already can't be on the ADA approved width of the sidewalk. And so if the fire chief's amenable, I would just strike all of F. And then G is listed twice, so I just need one G there. And then again, G contains more dates for timing. And again, I'd really like to put all the dates in one spot so it's really easy to refer back to it for our applicants so they can find all the dates they need in one spot. Okay, and then in the furnishing section, 7-14-11, we talk about no public property, including but not limited to light poles, utility poles, flower planters, et cetera, et cetera. Since we're listing things, it might be good just to mention the sidewalk because we don't want people drilling into the sidewalk to attach things. Or if we do, that's fine, but it's my understanding we don't. For section 7-14-12, the permittee shall keep the sidewalk cafe area sufficiently illuminated so as to prevent injury to persons using the same. I'm all for requiring safe lighting, but I'm curious, do we already have requirements for lighting in other places? As far as like what constitutes sufficiently illuminated for safety? Again, it just seems kind of vague. And so if we have lighting descriptions elsewhere in our ordinances, perhaps we could just reference that so people have some idea of what we consider safe lighting levels.
I doubt we do, because this is going to be some, I mean, typically, the lighting that you have for sidewalks is your street lighting. Here, I think the purpose for this paragraph is now we're going to have an encumbrance within the sidewalk, and so we want to see additional lighting that is going to provide guidance to the pedestrians as they're walking through in an area that you would normally would not have an encumbrance, so it would be something that's entirely new. Now, that doesn't mean that it shouldn't be more specific, but I do think that this is going to be unique to your code.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I just feel like some direction as far as, you know, I mean, do we count Christmas lights as enough lighting, or are we, you know, requiring some sort of light from above, or, you know, what exactly does that mean, so we can give people some idea and also make it clear for us and staff if something is not following it. It's just, it feels a little squishy right now to me. I would also like to mention that it would be great if we could require that the lighting be turned off when the sidewalk cafe is closed, just so we're not adding light pollution at night when it's not being used.
So do you mean, so on a night when they, I guess the question there becomes, so what if somebody's walking at 2 a.m.? I mean, the issue becomes the encumbrance is located there whether they're operating it or not. And so the purpose for the lighting is to provide, you know, assistance to pedestrians who are walking solely because it's there. And so that's where they're, I mean, because I totally understand what you're saying. Hey, if you're operating a business and it's not being operated, we want the lights off. But the issue is the encumbrance is still there, whether it's being, and so that gets back to my understanding of the paragraph is the purpose of the lighting is a belief that we need additional lighting over and above the street lights. And so I guess my thought would be either you don't need the lighting, the additional lighting, because the street lights are enough, or if you do need it, then you're going to need it the entire time that the encumbrance is there.
Okay, so this is lighting to protect people who are walking around the outside of it, not people who are using the sidewalk cafe.
My understanding is it's more for people who, it's for both, but that would then still apply to people who are utilizing the sidewalk but not utilizing the cafe at all hours of the day,
Okay.
essentially.
Okay, so if we're requiring lighting to prevent people from like walking into the fencing or the chairs and things like that, perhaps, you know, some low downward pointing lighting or something, or some sort of direction on that, because again, that's not necessarily clear here either.
And I mean, I think you raise a valid point. I mean, because the other sentence is talking about we want to make sure that there's not glare to impact the traffic. I mean, at a council level, you would have the ability to say, look, upon first blush, we believe that sufficient lighting exists from street lighting, and therefore you don't need to have the lighting, which then takes care of, I think, the issue that you have, which is if it's not being operated, then I don't want the lights on. It also then takes care of the second sentence where there is legitimately a concern that if you're going to put lighting there, how's it going to affect the traffic? And so I just want to throw that out there in case, as part of a discussion, you just say, look, let's not have a lighting requirement because we want to see if the street lighting is sufficient. And I'm just saying that right now, and I haven't talked to Jamie or Chief or anybody about that. I'm
No,
just
that's
throwing
fine.
it out there because I thought your comment was valid.
Okay. Next up, this is sort of a general comment, but I was at this point in the document when I noticed it. Sometimes we spell cafe and cafes with accents, and sometimes we don't, and I feel like we should pick one and standardize it. So I feel like we should standardize on cafe, either, like I said, with or without an accent, and then use it consistently. So section 714.14, the first sentence there where it says, provided the permittee complies with all the requirements for obtaining an alcoholic beverage license, and the Sidewalk Cafe is listed on the alcoholic beverage license application premises description. This seems like it's redundant for subsection A, and so should all just be folded in as one, because it's saying the same thing twice. And B also seems to just be saying that again as well. And then in subsection B, it says, further, the alcoholic beverage license will be automatically conditioned at the time of the amending of premises to allow for the consumption of alcoholic beverages within the Sidewalk Cafe area only. And while I understand the meaning was probably meaning not on the sidewalk outside of the Sidewalk Cafe, it definitely reads as though they're not allowed to sell alcohol in their establishment anymore. And so that wording should be clarified. In subsection C, the outdoor area used for the consumption of food and alcoholic beverages, I'm wondering if we are requiring visibility from the interior of the establishment for a place only selling food, or if that's specifically only for alcoholic beverages. And if it's only for alcoholic beverages, we shouldn't be mentioning food. And if it is also for food, we should mention this somewhere else, because this section is specifically about serving alcoholic beverages. And so if it applies to venues not selling alcoholic beverages, we need to make sure that's mentioned in their section as well. In subsection D, it says alcoholic beverages must be sold and served by the permittee or permittee's employees who have operators' licenses, and sold, served, and consumed by patrons seated at tables in the Sidewalk Cafe. I feel like something's either missing in this sentence, or we're just saying that the patrons have to sell and serve the alcohol. So I'm not sure what the purpose of this sentence was, but I just want to clarify that that doesn't read correctly to me. And so, it's what? I think something's missing. Okay. So if anybody knows what's missing, otherwise, yeah. I'm fine with it being consumed by the patrons, but not sold and served by the patrons. And going along with that, I don't feel it's necessary to require them to be seated at tables. I mean, if we have a place that just wants to have chairs with cup holders, I don't see why that's an issue. So unless there's a reason we specifically need them to be seated specifically at tables, I would get rid of that. Okay, subsection F, again, with the seated at tables, I'm fine saying that alcohol needs to be consumed within the Sidewalk Cafe only. But again, I don't understand the necessity of a table. And then in subsection G, city issued should be hyphenated.
I'm going to speculate now, but I think the rationale for a table is we don't want to just have outdoor bars. Or maybe you do. But the idea being, if this truly is a cafe, and yes, you're going to have alcohol, but there's going to be a food associated with it. Otherwise, you're effectively allowing beer gardens to be set up and maybe that's fine, but I think that's the rationale for the tables identified, is there's an expectation that there are going to be tables because you want the ability to eat food there. Now, again, it's your decision, but I think that's the reason why that's in there.
Okay. Well, I can see that point of view. I don't necessarily agree with it. Again, I don't feel like a Sidewalk Cafe should specifically be restricted to what alcoholic establishments need, because ice cream shops may have them. I mean, there's lots of other reasons that someone might want to have a Sidewalk Cafe besides alcohol. But also, I mean, if the difference between allowing a Sidewalk Cafe and not is whether or not there's a table there to make it not a beer garden, I guess I just, I don't know. I guess that's not a big deal for me, and I don't feel there's a need for tables to be required. And I feel like it makes it more flexible if we allow people to choose the kind of furniture that fits their patrons the best. All right, I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I just want to add one thing, I guess, is that I really hope we can at least come to a decision tonight, but I do think a lot of the issues you raised would need to be cleaned up regardless, and we can always come back and clean them up as well. But yeah, no motions yet, so questions, comments, or motions? Alder Posey and then Alder Humke.
I've got a couple things, but I do want to start with our one business owner who's here this evening. Could I ask you a question, please? So, you've heard all this discussion. As a business owner, was there anything in this process or what you've heard that you felt as a business owner would prevent you from being able to set something up, work with things? Was there anything this evening or in your previous rating? Because I think, you are the kind of representing all the potential people in the city who would be a business owner of a sidewalk cafe. So I know that, we've looked at your particular establishment back when 2020 COVID was happening. It was great to be able to see you set things up. Hopefully we can come to something to help you to move forward. But yeah, since you're our representative for all the businesses apparently this evening, so I just want to hear what you think.
Well, I appreciate you asking, and I appreciate all the sentiments that have been made thus far. I think when it got so honed in on being Tootin' Kate's, and we have a more unique location than other places on Main Street, it just kind of got bogged down. I will say, even before the last meeting, I had measured and remeasured and had multiple eyes on it and knew that I was well within the parameters of the setback, of the ADA requirements. And so I feel strongly that it's doable. I would never intend on having like 4-seaters out there. I'm talking, as the picture went around, 2 seats, a little drum table. I mean, very just casual, minimal, small footprint seating. And it works. I mean, the math is the math. I do agree a lot that tying it strictly to alcohol is a mistake, because I know for a fact I've talked to at least one other business on Main Street that's a boutique that love the idea of having that option for a sidewalk cafe for whatever event they would need it for. Other than that, I just think it's beneficial to our community. I believe that wholeheartedly. I don't feel that people are going to run and do this, if I'm honest. I mean, I'm pushing for it, but I don't know that you're going to have a line out the door if it passes and everyone's going to want to do it. People need to understand what it takes, how much cost it is to make it a reality. I'm willing to do that, and I think if someone takes the lead in doing that, it will only catch on and benefit all.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
My other couple of quick points were dealing with, I did pull up when we started talking about zoning and our zoning tables and everything else regards to residential space and what we have in place already. Currently, our eating and drinking uses are permitted in our suburban commercial, central commercial, and neighborhood office. So if you're interested, there's a table, and it's 13-1-105G that can show you where it's permitted currently and conditional. And so that takes this residential discussion. You would have to, in order to have a restaurant, in order to have a brewery, winery, distillery, tasting room, coffee, tea shop, microbrewery, restaurant, delivery, carry out only, restaurant, fast casual, restaurant, sit down. Any of those things, you have to currently, under our current zoning, be there. Now, great thing, if you look at our zoning map, because I had time to pull that up too, most of our downtown area is that central commercial. So it's already there. We also have most of Verona Avenue falls under the suburban commercial. So we have the things in place for where most of our businesses are already without having to like really, I don't know, get into the super duper on residential this or that, because it's just not going to be there because our zoning doesn't allow it right now. They'd have to come to us anyway to have a cafe because they can't have it without having these things in place. So, other couple quick things, I'll just jump back to the removing the 3 or 4 people, I'm good with that. I also, my concern with the sections about furnishings and such are just dealing with line of sight. So I am actually quite all right with the drawings so that the police chief can look at it and make sure any nearby driveways, all of these areas that we have, you know, we don't want people putting up an umbrella if it's going to impact the line of sight for a driveway for somebody driving along the street. None of us want that. We don't want a pedestrian getting hit. We don't want any of that. So I think allowing and having specific drawings regarding, you know, and maybe it's photos, furnishings, whatever it might be, so that as part of that permit process, they can receive feedback and the police chief and whoever else in public safety can look at that. I don't necessarily feel that it has to be something that comes up to our council level, but hopefully that's something we can deal with as far as the permitting side. I'm okay with three-sided, and one of the things I know Alder Tucker Long brought about was a lot of things that are repeating. One thing that can be helpful for repeating is, and I'm sure you know this from Plan Commission days, people are going to pull out the section that they need. They don't want to fish for things in the other sections. So in some cases, I do think repeating things that may exist in other sections, because somebody's going to pull out, I want to do a sidewalk cafe, I have my restaurant, I have all this, I just want to pull this out. So I feel like that is necessary to repeat some things so that people can find things efficiently, which I think was the goal of what Alder Tucker Long was discussing. And that gets me to the end of my list. Oh, and I do go along with the seated at tables does mean that it's a cafe, and I had actually already written, not a bar. And because we don't want people walking back and forth socializing necessarily, especially if, you know, people are trying to walk around downtown with their bikes or their dogs on a Saturday. And so, but I know that our current example, which was kind of even almost a pilot, has done a great job. So hopefully we can get this figured out to move that.
Alder Helmke.
It just,
Oh, sorry, Mr. Kleinmeyer.
if I can, I just, the discussions so far tonight related to alcohol, I mean, it seems there's two things. One, I do, and I know that you haven't said this, but we do need language in this section relating to alcohol so that we provide, people know that, hey, if you have a sidewalk permit and you do want to serve alcohol, here's what's going to apply. I do think it can be reorganized without question. And I think I've heard a number of people say that you want to do things that, you know, aren't going to make work more difficult for staff, and I think that's exactly the approach you should take. You don't have to do the deadlines that are in here, but I do fundamentally believe that if you have sidewalk cafe permits and they want alcohol, that if you don't essentially utilize the same dates as for your alcohol licensing, that will make things more difficult on staff. And so, again, it's your determination, but I do believe there's value in the timing that you have here. And again, the timing does not apply to the initial application. So if somebody starts a business in, you know, July 15th, they still can get that, come in and get an application for the rest of the year and then just file for renewal for the next year. But to the extent that anybody is going to have alcohol, and I agree that not all of them will, and maybe only a small percentage, but for any of those that do, there is value in having the process proceed at the same time frame for the alcohol licensing for staff.
Alder Helmke, and then Alder Tucker Long.
Thank you. So as the person who wanted the pictures, I think that was in the last meeting, I was the one who had said that. I do think it's helpful. I agree with what Alder Posey has said. I think from a business standpoint, if I were a business owner and didn't provide those, and then after the fact was told I couldn't use them, that's an expense that you would definitely not want to have. I think it's helpful, like Alder Posey said about line of sight, just concerns that the chief might have about safety concerns that maybe the business owner wouldn't realize. So I think having the drawing to scale of what is going to look like is important. I also agree that we should have tables at these cafes. There's a cafe, so we should have tables for people to put the items that they have purchased on the tables. My other final, I think, hopefully the final question is actually to the chief. So I've heard comments about this in a location that there's not parking or a lower speed limit. I'm trying to, I guess, get a sense of like safety. I guess that's where I'm trying to wrap my head around. I'm good with like the 2 feet from the edge of the curb. People are talking about less than that in those quieter areas. I'm curious what you think about that, because that's where my sort of unsureness is coming in.
Yeah, I had offered an opinion previously that I am okay with the 2-foot setback where there is parking, because it does make sense that the doors have to open and you need that space. But if there isn't parking in front of the business, I'm okay with less than 2 feet.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you. Great, that's all I
With
had.
my contingency that the fencing is adequate and would actually prevent somebody from falling into the street, because that's the purpose of it.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That is actually really helpful. Thank you. That's all I have.
Alder Tucker-Long.
Going back to what Attorney Clanmeyer was saying, could we require that if they will be serving alcohol, that the sidewalk cafe permit has to be submitted ahead of their alcohol permit? Is that, I mean, do they need the sidewalk cafe permit first and then they update their liquor license for it? Or do they happen at the same
In
time?
all likelihood, they would go hand in hand, because to serve alcohol on the sidewalk cafe, their alcohol license is going to have to identify that as part of their premises. And so effectively, the sidewalk cafe application where they're and that's another reason to have three-sided or fencing, is because then it's actually going to be easier for the applicant to be able to identify the premises within which they're going to serve alcohol. But, I mean, both of those documents are necessarily going to have to identify the premises outside where they want to serve. And so I think they would run concurrently with each other.
So I'm curious if it would work to simplify things to say, if you're going to be serving alcohol in your sidewalk cafe permit has to be submitted with your alcohol license renewal, and then everybody else can just do it whenever.
But if you're going to have renewals, you typically want to have your renewal dates set for all similar permits at the same time. In other words, I think it's going to make sense for you, your initial application, you can request at any time during the year. But from an administrative standpoint, let's say now you have 10 sidewalk permits, you're going to want to process all those at the same time.
But we're already giving them 5 months, right?
Well, I mean, whether you choose that it's May 1st through the end of it, I mean, you want to have your annual licensing year to be the same, and for all of the permits. And as soon as you do that, then you want to have the same application deadline for all of those permits. Or else you theoretically could have one business, their sidewalk permit is going to run 12 months on one set of dates, a second one a different set of dates, and a third one a third set of dates, and that's going to get really cumbersome for staff. And so that's why it's set up the way it is once you have your initial permit, then the renewal process is going to be the same for everyone, whether you serve alcohol or not, so that all of them can be processed at the same time.
Other question, Alder Lytle.
I don't have a lot to add here. I do agree that I think the important thing is for us to reach an agreement. So our applicant that's been, a very good advocate for this has the opportunity to enjoy the summer season with some additional spacing. The one comment I would offer, not finding myself being more conservative about safety than our chief, but this idea of having some separation between the curb and where people are sitting, I think is warranted. I've sat at that intersection northbound too many times, seeing people trying to create a right turn lane where there is none. I don't necessarily think 2 feet from back of curb is required. I would say either 2 feet from face of curb, 1 foot from back of curb, some bit of separation. So if someone with a vehicle does something they shouldn't and they have wide mirrors and they're driving right along the curb, those folks have some degree of cushion. And I feel strongly enough about that until we see data otherwise, I think we would want to start with that level of safety, that level of cushion. I don't think in this particular case you'd be able to get 2 seats side by side however we did it. So we wouldn't necessarily decrease the seating capacity for our first applicant, and we would strike that balance of having a little bit of safety cushion for folks behaving badly, trying to add a lane where there shouldn't be. So otherwise, happy to hash through the other comments and get an ordinance that we can agree on.
If you could call on me, I'd like to add to that.
Yeah.
Love that.
Chief Justice.
Having the fence right on the curb would be problematic if there was a winter event with snow plowing operation, and there would probably be damage to that fence. So in that regard, having the 2-foot setback would help with that as well. I know the draft ordinance is trying to account for winter weather. I know you also suggested maybe all winter long would be fine. We do have to consider snow removal, and it would be pushed up into that area, and like I said, probably cause damage. Thank you.
I guess I'm going to suggest one thing to the body is that if someone's so inclined that they could perhaps make a motion and we could start working off of it. Because both the draft that was submitted by Alder Kimmett and the staff recommendation don't have all the things that I think we have consensus on, so we should probably start with something. So if somebody wants to make some motion for what to start with.
Can I mean, to the extent that you make more than, let's say, and I'm just picking an arbitrary subject number, 4 or 5 changes, it should come back to you. I mean, I've heard remove more than 3 in subsection 7-14-2. That's pretty easy to mark. I know there's been some discussion about 7-14-3 regarding residential. I've heard some discussion about removing that entirely. Another thing that you can do is just say no permit shall be issued for a sidewalk cafe located in a residential zoning district, which I think gets at some of the issues. But knowing what Alder Posey said, it may be just removing, part of that is information to the public then. That's an easy change. I really found Alder Tucker Long's, I mean, she had some excellent comments in the version that I saw. There's 39 comments in there. I mean, to the extent that you start going, and all of them may be valid, or at least 75% of them, but we definitely can't pass an ordinance that includes that many changes. I mean, then it has to come back to you.
Are these questions for Mr. Kleinmeyer or? Okay, Alder Humke.
Can we pass an ordinance that we then go back next time and if we high level agree on 2 changes, if we agree on, let's say it's distance and maybe one other thing, can we pass that so that she can move forward with doing the things that she needs to do and then come back and tidy everything up in the next, would that work if it's just sort of
It can. I mean, I don't necessarily think that usually you wouldn't have a cleanup that comes that quickly, but it's certainly within your discretion to do that. And, especially what I would say then is you would theoretically pass an ordinance with 2 or 3 changes to it tonight, but then you would also want to have further discussion on, well, I guess let me throw this out there. What my belief is what makes sense on that would be then I have a version of what Alder Tucker Long sent out. I have the ability to send it to you and receive, I mean, either you could have a discussion right now on, oh yeah, we agree with this, this, and this, and not that. That might take you 2 hours. Or it can be, I can send it to you and you can respond to me individually with this is what I think should be done. And then staff has the ability to say, okay, we've essentially gathered this information. Come back with that cleanup. It probably would not come back at your next meeting, but a few meetings down the road.
I guess could I offer something instead is that we do it like we do the budgets, where everyone submits amendments, staff compiles them, and then the council just votes down the list. And it passes, it doesn't pass. Because then everything would be in the agenda packet, and staff wouldn't have to try to.
Yeah, I guess the only concern would be how some of these, on the reorganization, that's really something that you don't want to vote on individually. You would want us to say, okay, does everyone agree that this stuff should be reorganized? All right, we're going to come back and we're going to reorganize these different sections. So I think there's some that you could do that on, but not others.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, if it's typo cleanup and other stuff like that, I think, staff could do it. But some of the stuff that's policy, I'd rather just see it laid out, no setback, 1 foot, 2 foot, and then just let people vote, and whatever passes, and that's what we do, and whatever doesn't. Because otherwise, I think we tried to do that where staff took feedback from people, and frankly, it didn't work. And this is kind of why we're at 8:30.
Well, I guess, are you talking about doing that tonight right now?
No, I'm talking
Okay.
about when we come back, that basically people will submit amendments to staff, and then staff will just kind of
Okay, yeah.
collect them, and then we'll just go down the list. Because, tonight it would be a mess to try to do that now. So like, I guess, I think what I'm hearing is we could pass one now with a few changes, so we can get the process rolling for any applicants who want to move forward. And then at the next meeting or the meeting after that, we can come and kind of swoop back in and do cleanup and stuff like that.
Certainly, yes.
I saw Alder Hoek's hand up for a while, and then Alder Kimmett and Alder Posey.
Right, no, I understand, because I definitely, I think with the, I got the version this morning, and then I got a version handed to me in a piece of paper, and so now there's all these, like, I just want to make sure that we all know what it is we're actually voting on. But so if we pass something today, like, do we know that we're not changing something that's going to impact an application? Because I would hate to have a fence get built or purchased, and then you're like, oh, just kidding, we decided it's this and this now, right? So like, I don't, like, do we?
First of all, you should be acting off of the version that's in your packet, because that's the one that was made for the public. Now, doesn't mean that the other changes can't be included in the motion, the one that you received now, but I would definitely, the motion that you make and any changes that you make, I would work off of the version that's in your packet.
Right, so I mean, I'm sure you guys have heard me say this before, I do not like on-the-fly changes, so I'm like sweating with the 39 changes over here. And I don't, and like, I get like yes, it is summer and we want to make sure that we can get this patio rolling, but like, with this weather, it's also not ideal right now. But I would rather do it right, and I just want to make sure I know so I can read through it and know what I'm voting on. So I don't know, I don't want to vote. I guess I don't want to vote on anything today. I want to just see what it actually is, and then, and if you want to go the agenda, like the line item vote, or however we want to do it, I hate to keep bringing this up and up and up, but I just want to get it right.
Alder Kimmett and Alder Posey. I guess it depends on what you want to do.
If we wanted to go with 3 or 2 overarching changes, and how would we come to a consensus of what those are, and then how would that motion be put forward?
I mean, I guess if you were to make the motion, you could say, I move we adopt what's in the packet, striking the line about 3 or more, striking 714-3A, and changing the setback to 1 foot if it's, if there's no adjacent parking.
Okay.
I think that's what I'm hearing, so you could make that motion.
Then, hold on. I move that we approve ordinance number 24-1053, creating Title VII, Chapter 14 of the Code of Ordinances, Sidewalk Cafe Permits, as it is written in the packet with these changes. Striking the more than 3 people from section 17-14-2.
Are you just striking more than 3, but you're leaving people, right?
Sorry, getting rid of people as well. Not all people, just the more than 3 people. And then striking within 50 feet from section 7-14-3, leaving residential. And then amending to, oh, I've lost the section, 1 foot. Which one is it? So 7-14-10A, changing it to 1 foot setback from a street with no parking.
Before there's a second, I have a clarification on what you meant by 7-14-3 in location.
Yeah.
So if you strike within 50 feet of, like, so then it's
Oh, sorry,
not
so,
allowed in a residential, or were you striking it just totally because, as Alder Posey said, we can only have restaurants in certain districts?
oh, yeah, no,
right?
then striking the whole thing.
Okay, okay.
Sorry.
Is
Yeah,
that
I
clear?
mean, it's up to you. I mean, if you want to let people, I mean, there's value, I think, in having that section read, "No permit shall be issued for a sidewalk cafe located in a residential zoning district," simply as you have an ordinance that informs the public. I agree that based on the way that your ordinance is stated now, that because these are not permitted or conditional uses within any of the residential zoning districts, it's not absolutely required. So you can certainly strike that entire subparagraph A. It's a question of whether or not you want to leave any information there from an informative standpoint.
I don't think it's necessary. If people have questions, they can ask.
All right. Motion by Alder Kimmett. Is there a second?
Second.
Yes.
So while you have a motion in a second, I just want to so I think we've confirmed the first 2 changes. I guess the third change is, because I understand the motion to be in section 7-14-10, it would read, "The fence shall be set back at least 1 foot from the back of the curb to allow for room for parallel parking and safety from vehicular traffic." I just want to confirm that that's it, because I heard some people say, if there's parking, I'd still want there to be 2 feet.
So to amend that, I would actually make it the 1 foot from the back of the curb to allow for parking, striking parallel, but the rest of it the same.
So then, if there was parking, there'd only be a 1 foot setback.
So if there's not parking, sorry, I'm
So
getting,
can I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
The fence shall be set back at least 2 feet from the back of the curb to allow for room for parking and safety from vehicular traffic, comma, except if no parking is allowed adjacent to the sidewalk cafe, the setback shall be at least 1 foot.
yeah, that's cleaner.
Yeah.
And the speed is less than 35.
And the speed is less than 35? Okay.
Oh, if that's what you want, okay, yeah. And the speed is less than 35. I'm gonna have to watch the video on this one, but.
We're recording it like 3 ways, so we'll have backups.
But I mean, I think the clarity for purposes of the motion is if there's parking, it's a 2-foot setback. If there's not parking and the speed limit is less than 35 miles an hour, it's a 1-foot setback.
Yes, that is what I meant.
Okay.
And does the person who made the second, do they agree with the
Yes, I agree
clarifications?
with that.
Did that clarify it, Alder Tucker-Long? Okay. So we have, we have a motion before the body. Questions, comments on the motion? I'm going to say Alder Braithwaite, Alder Tucker-Long, and then Alder, oh wait, no, you were first. You're right. Yeah, sorry. Alder Posey, then Alder Braithwaite, then Alder Tucker-Long.
Thank you, because I'm a bit concerned moving this with the changes, just because are we creating confusion amongst our business owners that we're going to come back and change dates? We're going to come back, everything else that we've just talked about tonight, potentially changing. We're going to put a permit together, put it out. We've talked about work for staff and everything else, and here we are creating something that we know we're changing and changing quickly. We're going to put it out publicly and have other business owners, not just the one who's present, who might pick this up, and then they don't get their thing done, and suddenly we've changed dates, and now we've got to have something retroactive. Like, we're creating a potential problem, and I'm concerned about that. And as much as I really, really want to move this forward, and I want to be very clear, I don't want to create confusion. I don't want to create us having to do double work as staff. I don't want to create a permit that we just have to go back and change an application and all this stuff that's going to have to change. It's going to be up on the website, and then do we take it down? There's like so many things that it feels like we're rushing it so quickly, and I'm okay to a point because I want to, but at the same time, I feel like it's just happening. We've had so many changes we've discussed, and honestly, I'm having trouble keeping track. And I'm glad we've narrowed it down to 3, but I still feel like there were several other really important points made that should be in here, and we know we need to change them. So what can we do to make this move along quickly, but yet do it cleanly, so that when we put this out to the public, it's not confusing, and we're not going to quickly change it on them? Because we don't do that right now. We don't change things like this. And so our business owners and our public are used to things. And I'd like to make sure when we put it out, it's right. So, thank you.
Alder Braithwaite, and then Alder Tucker-Long.
First of all, I had a question about the 35 miles an hour speed limit. So are we saying then that if the speed is greater than 35 miles an hour, then the setback then becomes 2 feet as well? Okay, just wanted to clarify that. Secondly, I just wanted to suggest including language in the motion that anything that we would that we stick with this year as a permit year, so that whenever this if this does pass tonight with these minimal changes, businesses that do apply for sidewalk cafes this year apply for that permit and if approved, extends through the permit year until the November 15 date, because that's the date that they applied under, which would then give us time throughout the rest of the summer, fall, winter, to have the language cleaner for, and including a lot of the great comments that were made tonight, for the next permit year starting May 1st. Those dates can get tweaked based on other conditions. But I don't want businesses to have to apply twice in year 2024, because,
Sorry. Go ahead.
so encouraging to incorporate that language somehow.
Mr. Clymer, were you going to clarify?
So I think that's a valid, very valid point, both the ones that you all made. I think the way to approach it, though, if you want to do this, is, first of all, if your thought process is, I don't want to approve this until it's complete, then, that's how you get to vote tonight. The other approach is to say, look, we're going to approve this ordinance right now with these 3 changes. Don't bring it back until November. Because the typical rule is, because permits can get changed, and whenever you apply, you are essentially subject to the permit and the ordinance when you made your application. And so it could be confusing if the thought process is, for 2024, we want everybody to be on the same standards, then that would suggest either wait to act on this, or act on it tonight, but don't act on the new ordinance until November. Because if you did bring it back, then, and you did make changes, let's say, in mid-July, anybody who applies after you made those changes would be subject to the ordinance that's in place now, whereas anybody who made the application between, if you assume adoption tonight, and before that change is made, would be subject to the current ordinance. And that's case law, which is, when you apply for a permit, you have to abide by the laws that are, so that, to me, the compromise is, hey, we know that we should make some changes to this document potentially, bring them back so that everybody who applies in 2024 is going to be subject to what you adopted tonight, and then make the changes in November.
One follow-up question, could we have a caveat that essentially split the baby and say any permits that were granted under this ordinance are grandfathered in through the calendar year?
Well, they
or
would
the
definitely
November?
be, let's say that you adopted this ordinance tonight, and somebody applies tomorrow, and they're granted the permit, that permit is going to be issued to them, since it's their first one, through November 15th. So even if you came back and made changes in July, their permit would still be subject to whatever the terms and conditions of the ordinance are right now, because that's when their permit was issued. So they wouldn't have, that applicant would not have to make any adjustments based on the new code if it were adopted.
Yeah, the downside of that is that potentially whatever costs were incurred by the businesses, they would have to incur additional costs in '25 if the ordinance was changed and their layout,
In a meaningful way,
parameters
yeah,
in a
that's
meaningful way.
correct.
So Clerk Licht has a clarification.
So, not to drag this out because I want this to be over as well. But just to clarify, so in order for this ordinance to be in effect, it needs to be published in the newspaper. The soonest I can do that is June 6th. So if we did pass something tonight, it wouldn't go in effect until June 6th, correct?
Correct, because cities have to have their ordinances published.
So, the soonest anyone could apply for this, would that be June 6th?
Yes.
So then, that's next Thursday. We're already going to have our packet out for the next meeting by then.
So, and I agree with what you were saying, Holly. If you're looking at the effective date, though, then you're going to have, if you wait, then that effective date is not going to be June 6th anymore. It's going to be whatever the next published date is after your next meeting.
Well,
Everything kind of gets bumped out,
yes.
about a week
So
or
if
2
we
weeks.
pass this tonight, it gets published on June 6th. That's the earliest anyone could June 6th. That's the earliest anyone could apply for it.
Yep.
They wouldn't, what I'm saying is maybe we shouldn't rush this along because I don't think that she's or anyone is going to be able to apply for it and get a license at the next meeting anyway. Like, why
No,
not?
well, I mean, it's all going to, I mean, so if it gets adopted tonight, you can apply by June 6th, and then theoretically, the next council meeting after that, if everything's in order, if it's a complete application, then that person could come forward and, I'm just going to say, what, June 10th, okay. Or maybe the 24th, okay. But if you, so, and that's true. Now, if you decide not to take action tonight, or if the motion doesn't pass, and it doesn't sound like if the motion wouldn't pass, it has nothing to do with not wanting to have the ordinance, it's just wanting to have a more complete ordinance, then you're going to, let's say you bring it back for your next meeting, then, and it gets adopted, then you're going to still have that same buffer. Essentially, it's not going to become effective until a date in the future after it can be published, and then you're going to have to get an application, and then the council's not going to be able to act until that. So no matter when you adopt it, you're always going to have the same level of buffer effectively.
Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Alder Tucker Long, then Alder Harrison, then Alder Kimmett, I think is what I had.
Is this something where we could call a 15-minute recess after voting on, or after discussing which items we want changed? Like, I could quick write up the changes in the copy, and then everybody could have a copy to look at, and we vote on that?
I would not recommend that. There are changes, there are so many potential changes that have been identified in here that all of which I think deserve discussion, that to some of the other points, I don't think that within a 15-minute period or even an hour-long period, as an alderperson, you'd have a knowledge of what you're acting on.
Did you have a follow-up, or?
When you say in a matter of 15 minutes, we wouldn't know what we're acting on, you mean I meant 15 minutes break so we could write it up so people could read through it with the changes intact?
I understand that, but again, there's great value in what you submitted. There's 40 changes in your document, and essentially then you would want to take what I think would be longer than 15. We take longer than 15 minutes to reorganize and do everything. Let's say 45 minutes, and then you're going to want to give people hours to look at it to be able to digest it.
I mean, I feel like a lot of my changes, I mean, obviously, I requested them, so I think they're valid, but a lot of them are organizational, and that's not necessarily needed in the first draft. Those are changes we could make later that wouldn't have any impact on the approval process.
I mean, my recommendation is either you act on the 3 changes and you bring it back, or you wait and you bring back a more complete ordinance. I don't think that you should make the breadth of changes that you have discussed tonight, and then ask alders to vote on it. I think that that's just not a sufficient amount of information to review the Now, you all can disagree with me on that, but that's my personal opinion.
Okay, and one more clarification. If we want to add an additional item to the list, do we move to make an amendment to the motion?
Yes, I would ask for clarification from Mr. Kleinmeyer whether would be tipping it over with, not having heard the amendment.
I would say you probably have the ability to make one more change to the document.
Okay.
Can I ask
And
a
again,
question?
Is this a question? then?
It's a clarifying question about what we're talking about. So the number 39 or 40 is getting thrown out. Is all of that actual substantive changes, or is it organizational changes that staff can make post?
we can't make those organizational changes post. Those go well beyond, minor edits.
So like saying, get the second B out of subsection blah, blah, blah.
There's like 2 of those in that document. The rest are now, there's valid, and I agree that they're procedural in nature, but those changes to an ordinance go beyond what staff has the authority to do.
Okay.
I believe Alder Tucker Long still is on the stack right now.
I will defer to Mara, and can I have it back when she's done?
No, because Alder Helmke is not next. So
Oh, sorry.
if you would like to make a motion, this would be the time to do so.
Okay.
If you need to wait, that's fine too, but.
Yeah, I'll wait just a second.
Okay, so just to clarify where we're at, I have Alder Harrison, Alder Kimmett, myself, and Alder Helmke. Alder Harrison.
So I was just going to make the point that I thought a lot of these changes that, besides those 3 big ones that were presented in the motion, are mostly organization and like typos. So I'm personally okay with approving it with those 3 changes and then waiting to do some more like clarifying and reworking of the like way the document is structured. That was my whole point. We kind of already touched it, but yeah.
Okay, Alder Kimmett.
Same. I felt like the big substantive issues that we had already addressed, so we could get this passed, get it done. I really like what Alder Braithwaite said about let's keep it for the summer, see how things go, and rework it in the fall when it's time to look for next year.
All right, myself and Alder Helmke. Yeah, I just want to say I agree with Mr. Kleinmeyer that the changes are substantive, and like having staff kind of rework it after the fact can very easily lead to staff making changes that alders didn't expect them. And then it's like you modified an ordinance without the council, and that's obviously a really bad look for staff. And I wouldn't want to put staff in the position where they could mess things up really bad and change the intent of what alders thought they were voting on. So I'm fine with waiting. I do want to say I would like to go with the motion with any potential amendments that we have tonight. I think it's a really good first draft, and I think there's something to be said is on some level you can't really know all the changes you need to make until it exists, especially with something as complicated as this. I've worked in software adjacent industries or outright software industries for almost 20 years, and it's extremely normal to release stuff and then fix it. And I think that's a good attitude for the city to have. I wouldn't want to make major changes like we allow sidewalk cafes and then we instantly take it away. But if it's tweaking something that's been released, I feel very comfortable with what we have, especially since we're going with the initial staff recommendation with, at least at the moment, 3 amendments. So I'm totally comfortable voting on this tonight, and I would urge everyone to support this because I think it's going to be good. Not only for the one individual businesses here tonight, but I think it'll be good for the city too. Alder Helmke.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I really appreciate what Alder Braithwaite had, the point he made. I think it's important that we have the time period till November so we don't come back in a really quick time frame. I think the substantive, I'm going to reiterate what everybody else said, the substantive pieces that we want to have happen, we have made a motion to alter the ordinance on, and I think the other pieces are really truly just, yeah, moving some words around it. And so I feel comfortable voting on this tonight, saying that this is a good plan for us for going forward for the summer and seeing what happens and how we can tweak this going forward for next year. Thank you.
Alder Tucker Long.
Okay, I have 2 things that I would like to suggest as additional changes. Would you like them in separate motions?
No, I think I make a motion to amend the initial motion to include these additional changes to the draft ordinance.
Okay. In that case, I would like to move to amend the initial motion to include these 2 additional changes. I would like to strike section 7-14-3 subsection D subsection I, which reads, sorry, hang on one second. Which reads, the additional sidewalk proposed to be used is in front of another commercial use that does not qualify to obtain a sidewalk cafe permit. And then additionally, section 7-14-10 subsection F. Yes, subsection F. I would like to amend that to be within 5 feet of a fire hydrant, curb cut, or crosswalk.
Motion by Alder Tucker Long. Is there a second? Second. Seconded by Alder Lytle. Amendment before the body. We're now. Yes,
so
Mr. Clymer.
Clear, I believe the discussion on the hydrant before was we don't know what our existing code is, at least on that, and we're not sure if there are restrictions related to the curb cut or the crosswalk either. So if you adopt this change, you theoretically are adopting something that is inconsistent with your existing code language. And I just want to point that out. I'm not trying to advocate one way or the other, but the first change seems very appropriate in light of the comments that Alder Tucker Long made earlier and the fact that you already need to get consent. But that second one does have the potential of violating existing code language.
And potentially creating a contradictory where we ban it in one part of the ordinance and allow it in the other, because we've definitely had that happen in the past, and it tends to make people unhappy. Clerk Licht.
Section 5-581, blocking of fire hydrants prohibited, except for where marked with official traffic markings. No person shall park any motor vehicle within 10 feet of a fire hydrant or connection or otherwise interfere with the accessibility of a fire hydrant by piling, dumping, or placing any obstructive material within 10 feet of a fire hydrant, nor between them and the center line of the street without first obtaining written permission from the fire chief.
Alder Tucker Long.
So the reason I suggested this amendment is because that all applies to parking and the street accessibility of the fire hydrant, but I see head shaking, but maybe we could get clarification, because listening to Holly read it, it sounds like you can't place it in the street.
You cannot otherwise interfere with the accessibility of a fire hydrant by piling, dumping, or placing any obstructive material or object within 10 feet of a fire hydrant. So I read that as you can't put anything within 10 feet of a fire hydrant.
I thought you said between a fire hydrant and the center of the street, which would only be in the street.
I think there was a couple of different things.
So it says, okay, so it's from the beginning, except where marked with official traffic markings, no person shall park any motor vehicle within 10 feet of any fire hydrant or connection or otherwise interfere with the accessibility of a fire hydrant by piling, dumping, or placing any obstructive material or object within 10 feet of a fire hydrant.
So my recommendation is that and obviously we've had 3 minutes to think about it. I think there's a conflict. So this is what I would recommend. You have a motion and a second, so I think you have to take a vote on it. My recommendation is that you not vote in favor of this motion. That being said, there's nothing that prohibits a second amended motion to include the first change that you identified, and then allowing staff as related to the fire hydrant paragraph. This is going to come back to you, it sounds like, at some point in time later this year, more information on that topic. But the second component of the second phrase of what Holly identified, these fences definitely would be an obstruction to fire department access to a fire hydrant, because it's not just from the street that they have to get access, it's also between the structure and the fire hydrant. So that's my recommendation of how to proceed, since you already have the motion in a second.
Alder Tucker Long.
So you're suggesting that we vote against my motion and then I make a new one to amend the original motion. Is that correct?
No, what I'm suggesting is we have a motion in a second, so we need to act on it.
Okay.
I think that there's validity to, you asked for 2 changes. We've been focusing on the second change. Just because this motion gets voted down because the second change appears to be in conflict with the code, doesn't prohibit you then from, after this motion is made and acted upon, to make another amendment, a second amendment, where you would just say, I want section 7-14-3 sub D sub I deleted for the reasons that you've given. That's the section that says the additional sidewalk proposed to be used in front of another commercial use that does not qualify to obtain. I mean, because there may be some folks here who would be like, hey, I agree with you on that one, but I don't agree with you on the hydrant. And the hydrant one, I think, in looking at faces, is going to get voted down, and it may be that other one would pass, and so that's the reason for making the subsequent motion.
Okay, so there is a motion before the body. I'm just going to add, even if this was allowed under ordinance, we should still check with GMAHACA before we mess with fire hydrants, just as a general good practice. So I guess I'm in agreement with Mr. Clymer. I think the amendment as it's written should be written down. But any other comments, or should be voted down? Okay, we are voting on the amendment only, and the motion was to strike 7-14-3, section paren D, I, and then also in the section regarding 7-14, F-10, sub F. Okay, and then to change that in 17-14-10, paren F, to change 10 feet to 5 feet. All those in favor, say aye. Opposed, no?
No.
And that amendment fails. We are back on the main motion. Questions, comments, or amendments? Alder Tucker Long.
I would like to move that we amend the original motion to strike section 7-14-3 sub D sub I, removing the section restricting use of space in front of another building if that person is allowed to have a permit.
Second.
Motion by Alder Tucker Lung, seconded by Alder Harrison. Motion before the body. Questions or comments on this motion? Alder Posey.
I have a clarifying question. Does this involve additional insurance and such? Because obviously it's not a property they're leased to be using. It's not related. I know that we're dealing with the property that's directly out in front.
So,
you have an
so
answer?
I think the rationale for striking this subparagraph is because under the next subparagraph, if I'm a business owner and I want to put a sidewalk cafe, okay, right adjacent to my property, I can file an application. If I want to go to my neighboring property owner and say, hey, can I extend this so that it goes in front of you, you're going to have to get their consent. And so that's already covered, and yes, the entire premises, whether it falls just adjacent to your building or it stretches in, further than just adjacent to your building because you have consent, all of that area is going to have to be covered by your insurance.
Amendment before the body. Questions or comments on this one? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of amending the main motion by striking section 7-14-3 paren D paren I from the main motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And that motion passes. We are now discussing the main motion as amendment. Questions, comments, or further discussion?
Can we
Alder Posey, yes.
review again the exact 3 that we've got, please?
Sure. So,
Thank you.
and it's actually 4 now because of the amendment. So,
Thank you.
7-14-2 sub B, the words more than 3 would be struck so that it would read, or food that, no, people stays. Yeah.
Yes.
So, or food that provides seating for people in the form of a group of tables. So we just struck more than 3. Because I think we need people in there, because we need the reference, okay. 7-14-3 sub, in your packet, A has been struck as part of the motion. In your packet, 7-14-3 sub D, subsection I has been struck. And then, the fun one, 7-14-10 sub A, the sentence remains. It says, the fence shall be set back at least 2 feet from the back of the curb to allow room for parking and safety from vehicular traffic, comma, unless there is no parking and the speed limit is less than 35 miles an hour, in which case the setback shall be at least 1 foot.
Thank you.
So those are the 4 changes.
All right. Questions or comments on the motion? Alder Humke.
Can I ask just one question? Is it 1 foot from the back of the curb or 1 foot from the edge of the curb, just for clarification? Back of the curb.
Back of the curb.
Back of the, okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Other questions or comments? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of the amendment, or the motion as amended, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And that motion passes. All right. Anything further from public safety? Alder Hoax.
Nothing further.
All right. With that, we will move on to 10C, which is Personnel Committee. Alder Humke.
Yes, I make a motion for a memorandum of understanding between the City of Verona, nope, I'm reading the wrong thing, never mind. City of Verona Administrative Policy Number 4, Section 3-7, relating to sick leave transfer credit for sworn law enforcement lateral transfer hires of the City of Verona Police Department.
Motion by Alder Humke. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alder Tucker Lung. Alder Humke.
Okay. So the Verona Police Department has 4 vacancies and experienced recruitment challenges to fill positions with qualified officers. The intent is to help the police department retain current staff and recruit new staff by providing the following for new lateral transfer law enforcement officers who have qualified from a certified police academy, 96 hours of sick leave to a qualified officer with less than 5 years of experience, and 192 hours sick leave to a qualified officer with 5 or more years of experience. A resolution providing the framework of sick leave transfer for lateral transfers was passed by the Common Council at the April 8th, 2024 meeting, and the proposed policy and memorandum of understanding would formalize the intent of the resolution. If the policy is approved, enactment is contingent upon the approval of a memorandum of understanding with the Verona Professional Police Association and Wisconsin Professional Police Association, LEER. Staff worked with the Chief of Police and representatives of the VPPA and WPPA/LEER to craft the policy and MOU. Staff recommended the approval.
Motion before the body. Questions or comments on the motion? Seeing no hands. All right. All those in favor of approving City of Verona Administrative Policy Number 4, Section 3-7, relating to sick leave transfer credit for sworn law enforcement lateral transfer hires of the Verona Police Department, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And that motion passes. I will move on to C2. Alder Humke.
Yeah, I move for the City of Verona Administrative Policy Number 68 relating to telecommuting, striking the statement that, under eligibility, that the words "have worked at least 6 months at their assigned physical work location," and.
Motion by Alder Humke. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alder Tucker-Long. Alder Humke.
Yeah, the proposed policy would grant department heads discretion to approve telework for staff on an ad hoc basis, provided the duties of the position can be performed remotely and the needs of the department are met. The intent of the policy is to allow flexibility for staff to telecommute on an occasional, one-time, irregular, or emergency basis, provided the eligibility requirements outlined in the policy are met. The eligibility requirements include a satisfactory record for performance, attendance, and discipline, assigned telework acknowledgement form, and the employee must continue to meet performance standards and other expectations as part of their employment. Staff recommend approval of the policy. Would you like me to give clarification what we changed in committee?
Clarification maybe on the intent.
Okay, yeah. So, we believe that that a staff member can prove their competence and their ability to provide their duties within a short period of time, and we didn't want to put the time constrictions on for a 6-month period of time. We believe that this is a value add to staff members that can take advantage of this. The examples, are like in a snow emergency or a sick child, and we want people to have that flexibility so they want to work here. It's a benefit that we think is really valuable. The intention of this is not to have remote workers. Right, it's for having flexibility in situations that people need it on random bases, right, emergency bases. So we felt like, that there's plenty of employees that come here and start working and right away have proved that their value, and there's no reason that on these ad hoc bases that they couldn't take advantage of it. And it's based on their supervisor's approval. So if the supervisor didn't believe that they, could have this flexibility, then they wouldn't get it approved. So.
Thank you for that clarification. Motion before the body. Questions or comments on the motion? Elder Lytle.
I would have to say I am in agreement with not prescribing a specific timeline, while also stating that I do believe that the onboarding period for new staff is a prime opportunity for them to establish relationships, understand, practices that aren't formally documented. So with that in mind, if I could ask the city administrator if he believes that the intent of this can be communicated to all supervisors that would have eligible employees without the 6-month specific term.
Mr. Olek?
Thank you, Alder Lytle. Absolutely. We have staff meetings twice a month, and this is absolutely something that's easily communicated to them. We've talked about it all along, probably for the last 4 or 5 months, I'd say. And this is where you trust your managers, your supervisors, and put it this way, if it's abused, you'll know about it, guaranteed. So yeah. I appreciate the sentiment, and I will relay it.
Motion before the body. Other questions or comments on the motion? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of adopting City of Verona Administrative Policy Number 68 relating to telecommuting as was recommended by the Personnel Committee, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And that motion passes. Anything further from Personnel?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Excellent. We'll move on to item 11, which is new business. First up, we have a discussion and possible action regarding the memorandum of understanding between the City of Verona and the Verona Professional Police Association and Wisconsin Professional Police Association, Lear sick leave transfer for lateral transfer hires. Mr. Olick.
Well, thank you, Mayor. This MOU formally adopts the sick leave transfer as part of the contract between the City of Verona and the VPPA and WPPA Lear. Staff worked with all the professionals involved in law enforcement, top to bottom, to craft the MOU, and we recommend its approval.
Thank you for that explanation. Questions, comments, or motions on 11A? Alder Posey.
Quick question, and just reading the MOU, it does state that this is for this calendar year, fiscal year, correct? Because we negotiate the contract next year.
For the sick leave transfer, I don't think, I'd have to reread it. The bonuses are for this calendar year. This, I think, is, as I understand it, Chief, you can correct me if I'm wrong, a permanent policy that we're putting into place for, it will become part of the contract. We're actually amending the contract.
Yes, that's correct. The police department, the city, and the union have agreed to this, and it would be a permanent change.
Okay. I'm just reading a lot of 2024 in the MOU, so.
Other questions or comments on the motion? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of approving the memorandum of understanding between the City of Verona and the Verona Professional Police Association and Wisconsin Professional Police Association, Lear, sick leave transfer for lateral transfer hires, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion passes. I will move on to 11B, which is a discussion and possible action regarding a memorandum of understanding between the City of Verona and the Verona Professional Police Association and Wisconsin Professional Police Association, Lear recruitment and retention bonus. Mr. Olick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The MOU, again, formally adopts the recruitment and
Wait,
retention.
so I have a,
I'm sorry.
I
Oh,
messed
yes.
something up. On the previous item, do we have a motion? We didn't have a motion, right?
Oh,
So
I'm sorry.
caught myself there.
On autopilot here.
So I guess would someone like to make a motion on that? Alder Tucker-Long.
So this is for item A, right?
Yes.
Okay. I move that we approve the memorandum of understanding between the City of Verona and the Verona Professional Police Association and Wisconsin Professional Police Association / Lear sick leave transfer for lateral transfer hires.
Motion by Alder Tucker-Long. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Alder Humke. Motion before the body. You get a second chance at comments. All right, seeing none. All those in favor of approving the memorandum of understanding between the City of Verona and the Verona Professional Police Association and Wisconsin Professional Police Association / Lear sick leave transfer for lateral transfer hires, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. And that motion passes. All right, sorry about that. We're on 11B.
No worries, Mr. Mayor. 11B, this is the MOU between the City of Verona and the VPPA and WPPA Lear for the recruitment and retention bonus, which applies to fiscal year 2024. So this formally adopts the recruitment and retention bonus policy between the City of Verona and the VPPA and WPPA Lear. One note within here, and this was not known on April 8th when we passed the resolution on this matter. There's an overtime calculation that applies in this particular case where it bumps up the average wage over the course of the year, and according to FLSA standards for bonuses, as they relate to recalculating overtime rates, given the fact that our law enforcement officers will accumulate overtime, we estimate an additional $6,000 to7,000 as a cost to implement the retention bonus program. And that was based on the most recent May payroll. So we're about 5/12 the way through We've accumulated about 2,500 in overtime related to this policy. And for those newer alders who weren't here at the time, the overall program costs about $95,000. It's being paid out of the vacancies for the police department, of which let's see, a month ago was as much as $210,000 is what we estimated the savings so far this year, or I would say unpaid wages is how I would classify that to officers who would have otherwise been employed. So the $5,000 to $6,000 that this is additional can absolutely be covered by the vacancies that we have and continue to have. So that was as of a month ago. So anyway, we worked again with the chief, with VPPA, WPPA, Lear staff to craft this MOU, and it only applies to 2024. Next year as a contract year, negotiations will commence, but anyway, we recommend approval.
Thank you for that explanation. Questions, comments, or motions on this item? Alder Chucker-Long.
I move that we approve the memorandum of understanding between the City of Verona and the Verona Professional Police Association and the Wisconsin Professional Police Association / Lear recruitment and retention bonus.
Motion by Alder Chucker-Long. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by, I think Alder Harrison had it? All right. Motion before the body. Questions or comments on this motion? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of approving the memorandum of understanding between the City of Verona and the Verona Professional Police Association and the Wisconsin Professional Police Association / Lear recruitment and retention bonus signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And that motion passes. We'll move on to item 12, adjournment. To motion
moved.
motion by Alder Hooks. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alder Humke. All those in favor of adjournment say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And we are adjourned at 9:18 p.m. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. The police department appreciate your support, so thank you. Thank you. We're already seeing success. We already got a good lateral transfer